Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Saturday morning to you all. Hope you guys are having a great start to your weekend. Feeling great this morning. Having a great Saturday so far. Got you an update on what's going to unfold today. Also, towards the end of the video, we'll give you a brief update on what's going on in the tropics. But stay tuned this evening. I want to give you a more longer video about what is happening out there with what we call Invest 94L. Has a decent chance to become our next named storm, which would be Bonnie. So we'll get much more detail tonight. So stay tuned for this evening's video if you're interested. Could it affect areas of the U.S.? Who knows? Who knows? But there's a solid chance it's going to affect landmass in general. Whether you're in the Lesser Antilles, Central America, the Greater Antilles, or somewhere in the Gulf or the Southeast, who knows? But we'll talk about that more tonight. If you guys have not subscribed, definitely consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. If you guys got anything I can pray about, please put it in the comments below. As always, it gives me an opportunity to pray over, but more importantly, it gives a whole lot of others an opportunity to do so too. And y'all can look out for one another, and more importantly, glorify God doing it. So let's get rocking this morning. Let's take a look at water vapor loop. We still have a ridge dominating. It's definitely flattened out over the last several days, and it's really just sitting over areas of the southern U.S. It's still affecting areas of the southeast, but really more average temperatures will dominate the weather pattern for the foreseeable future. Up here, you have a lot of convection ongoing from the leftover showers and storms from last night. This is continuing to move over portions of the Midwest and the north central U.S. But hot temperatures where you have actually heat advisories already ongoing and set up for today, where a lot of heating will occur at the surface and a lot of humidity will be around for areas of the south central U.S. So this is kind of what's going on right now. We take a look at the Storm Prediction Center. You know, it's a decently quiet day. You just have a pretty large marginal risk extending from the panhandle of Texas, Oklahoma, stretching all the way to Chicago, Illinois. So some severe storms, some strong severe storms are possible in this area. Who knows? It's a possibility this could get upgraded somewhere in this risk area to a slight risk. So we'll talk about who could see some storms today. We also take a look at the watches and warnings right now. You do have these heat advisories in the orange. So it's going to get pretty hot today in the southern plains and the south central U.S., areas of the Mississippi Valley. So we'll talk a little bit about that also. And then take a look at the National Hurricane Center, the latest and greatest information from 2 a.m. By the time some of you guys watch this, it'll be the 8 a.m. update. Something might change, but I can tell you nothing's changed over really the last 12 to 18 hours. You have a 60% chance to develop from 94L, which is our invest out here in the tropical Atlantic. It's firing a little convection this morning, but nothing too crazy from overnight. It's still just a strong wave out there, and it will continue to see what it can try to do over the next few days before I think it enters a more favorable environment here in the Caribbean, which actually normally isn't very favorable this time of the year. Then you have a 20% chance. This is kind of new, guys. A 20% chance of development here in the northwest Gulf of Mexico. And basically what will fire up this, and we'll talk about this more tonight, so definitely stay tuned, especially if you're in Texas, places like that. Basically a leftover piece of energy, a leftover MCS, mesoscale convective system. We'll kind of get into the Gulf of Mexico, and then models have been hitting on it for really the last 3 or 4 days. That something can get fired up here in the Gulf of Mexico, and maybe a quick spin up, but we'll see what develops out of that. I want to mention, I don't talk about this a whole lot. I probably should talk about it more, but this is the latest and greatest information from the Drought National Weather Service Drought Monitor here, talking about basically the latest information on who's ongoing what level drought. So still an ongoing big time exceptional drought in areas of Texas. Y'all guys need the rain. We know that, and hopefully we can get it. And unfortunately, maybe what takes getting it is a tropical system. And let's hope that's not the case. We just need a good pattern down here that could promote some more rain. But, I'm just not really seeing it much over the next several days. But we know out west, it seems like out west is always on the drought, always on fire. But the southeast also is having drought conditions, which is a lot more abnormal, if you will. But, there's certain areas in this orange right here that you see that is under a severe drought in areas of eastern North Carolina, down near Savannah, southern sections of North Carolina. And then you just have a moderate drought and maybe the lighter shades of orange here. So it is kind of dry. If you think it's dry where you're at in the southeast, chances are it actually is dry. Some areas just have not been taking advantage, not like it's their choice. I say that like it's their choice, but some certain areas have just not been getting in on the action like others have in the southeast with these storms. We'll take a look at the southeast today as we're getting into the early afternoon hours and mid-afternoon. Some storms are possible down here in the Panhandle of Florida, southern sections of Alabama. Maybe some storms action up here in the southern Appalachian Mountains here in North Carolina and Tennessee. Some storms could certainly fire up. So if you're vacationing up in the mountains doing some hiking, do not be surprised if you guys see a pop-up storm. And, it could be pretty widespread up there in the mountains. Definitely a stormy afternoon if you're up in the mountains this weekend. But other than that, just a pop-up shower storm in Alabama, Louisiana, maybe Mississippi. But other than that, nothing widespread, nothing too crazy. Up here in the Northeast, we'll get into this afternoon. Pretty quiet weather. Maine, down the downeast areas could see some showers and storms are certainly possible, but nothing too crazy. Just typical summer storms are certainly possible with a piece of energy swinging through. We'll go on and look at the north central U.S. and the Midwest. Lingering moisture still ongoing. This will continue to move through areas of northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin. Probably areas like Chicago will see a little bit of rain here later this morning into the early afternoon hours. And then maybe some additional storms with the atmosphere becoming a little bit more prime for showers and storms. Will develop here in Wisconsin, northern Illinois, maybe areas of Iowa a little bit later today where you actually have a marginal risk extending up through this region. So some of these storms in northern Illinois could certainly be severe. So even watch out Chicago a little bit later this evening around dinner time. If you're out and about, another round of storms may move through. Some of these could be severe. Up here in the northern areas of Michigan and Wisconsin, maybe some storms later this afternoon, this evening are certainly possible to whip on through. You look at the south central U.S. and, probably sometime early this afternoon into the late afternoon hours, some storms are most likely going to develop here near Amarillo, out here in western sections of Oklahoma. These will develop, and we'll see how much steam they can uphold as they move through the overnight hours and start to move into areas like Kansas. But like I said, guys, not expecting any way of any kind of outbreak of severe storms in this area, but some certain areas could definitely see some storms. And then maybe some beneficial rain in areas of New Mexico, southern Colorado is certainly possible. So we need this rain to really kind of move into areas of western Texas for sure, and central Texas also. Temperatures today, very hot across Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi. You guys are still under this heat dome. It kind of flexed over here into the southeast earlier this week. But it didn't stay long. It kind of just moved over here, kind of flirted with the southeast, and then kind of moved back and flattened out. Well, it's still just been over this portion of the country the entire time. So expect areas to get over 100 for really anywhere in those states I just mentioned. Nashville could be very hot. The entire state of Mississippi, Memphis, Little Rock, Dallas, Fort Worth, Oklahoma City. Even all the way up to Columbia, Missouri, St. Louis could nip 100 degrees a day, probably at least getting up to the mid to upper 90s. Very hot weather in this portion of the country. But the southeast, more seasonal weather, but it's going to get pretty hot in the Carolinas and Georgia today still, up into low to mid 90s. Yesterday was kind of a cooler day, even though it's sad to say the low 90s is a cooler day, but you could certainly tell it was more average temperatures where I live here in South Carolina. But the Northeast, finally a little bit warmer, more summer-like weather, getting well into the 80s in the big cities along the I-95 corridor. Even the interior Northeast, getting into the 80s. Only the higher mountaintops are saved from the 80s. But up here in the north central U.S., a cold front has moved through. And some cooler weather, 70s and even just some 50s and 60s up here in the Dakotas is certainly possible. So keeping on moving here, we're going to look at the Atlantic now. This is the wave, not this. This is not a wave. This is a wave, but this is not a wave that's expected to develop. This is actually the first piece of energy that was getting a little bit more love than this piece of energy way earlier this week. So this is the one, though, expected to potentially develop into our next named storm. It's, doesn't necessarily look all that pretty this morning, but it's still popping off some convection. Certainly the low-level circulation and the mid-level circulation, if there's any low-level circulation at all, is certainly not aligned, and you wouldn't expect this to be the case anyways with a tropical wave like this. But this still, like I said, like we looked at this, still has a 60% chance to develop. It just has not increased. We'll see what happens this weekend. But a big update tonight, regardless of what the models do. We'll discuss this tonight to try to figure out what's going to happen. But I can tell you, sometime late next week, it does have an above 50% chance to develop into a tropical storm once it gets into the Caribbean. And, you know, we look at the cyclone locations based off these line plots right here, and it does a really good it does a really good job of showing us what's going to happen depending on the directional movement of whatever does develop here. You know, if you look up here, the blues are once you get below 1,000 millibar low pressure. Once you get below 1,000 millibar low pressure, that means you're probably starting to get into tropical storm status, which means you have a named storm. So anywhere where you see these blues and the lines, that is probably getting closer to that tropical storm status, if not tropical storm status. But once you get into these reds, that is a sub 90 to 80 millibar low pressure, which means you probably got a hurricane. And if you notice, all the ones in the red, which are the stronger systems, won't deter northwest, as most stronger systems always try to go north in the northern hemisphere. So, you know, it's just something we got to watch. The weaker systems will probably go just more due west and just kind of plow right into Central America as a weaker system and a lot of tropical moisture. But listen, there's a lot of time to figure this out. This really is just now starting to enter the central tropical Atlantic. It's got a long ways to go before it even gets to the Lesser Antilles. So stay tuned tonight. We're going to talk more on this and try to figure out what we can about what this is going to do. You guys have a great Saturday. God bless all y'all, and I'll talk to y'all again this evening.